Lant, could you tell us tell me an idea that is probably a super valuable, important idea that it's just not on the table of the development agenda?
So the strange thing about the current development agenda is that specific individuals for specific interventions are all the rage. There was just an article in Science magazine, which is the premier publication in all of the sciences, about a program that tried to work with poor people in poor countries to raise their income. This program was featured because it was widely considered such a big success. You know why it was a success? They spent $4,000 per household in the first 3 years of investment to produce $400 in income at the end of those 3 years. That's what's widely regarded as a development success. On the other hand, I've done a study of what if you just let one of those workers reduce the borders, the barriers that borders face in rich countries, and just let them work. The typical gain is about $15,000 in the first year for free. What do I mean by for free? Well, the difference in productivity is just because the place the person is in is unproductive, and the place of the United States or the place of Germany or the place of the UK is just massively more productive. So trying to enhance the person's productivity in the place they're in faces very limited upside possibilities. We're just literally allowing people to move from one country to another has $15,000 a year. It's the magnitude of what is generated by these huge, intensive poverty interventions literally can be accomplished with weeks worth of work in a rich country. But it's not on the development agenda. Part of the reason it's not on the development agenda is that rich countries don't want it. And rich countries, by being large and powerful and influential, they tend to dominate the intellectual and policy agenda, and they just don't want it on the agenda. I had a colleague who was asked to write a big book about what can be done for the development of Africa, and they said, talk about anything you want except migration. Don't mention that migration. So I think the big thing that just dwarfs everything else, both at the micro level and at the macro level in terms of its potential impact, is labor mobility across borders. It's just huge potential impact. We're completely confident in the magnitude of it. We're completely confident in the reliability of it compared to anything else that's being done at a programmatic level in development, but we just don't talk about it.
But we just went through Brexit. We've gone through an election in the US where the issue of migration, mind you, in the US, migrants are about 14% of the overall population. In Britain, they're probably a little bit, not much higher than that, and many of these migrants are Europeans. But still, the political reaction seems to be generalized. Should people be worried that such a move would lower the wages of the unskilled in their home country?
I really think on this issue, economics has come to a really settled, well-evidenced conclusion that no, just no. We have had non-experimental evidence, we've had experimental evidence, we've had, what happens when a bunch of Cubans pitch up in Miami because Castro decides to let a bunch of them go, what happens when a bunch of Russians pitch up in Israel because Russia decides to let Russian Jews go. We've had all kinds of experiences and evidences, and by and large, the arrival of new immigrants, it creates as much economic activity as it takes, and hence it doesn't actually fundamentally lower the wages. It doesn't lower the average wages because mostly low-skilled immigrants are not at all good substitutes for existing domestic workers. And second, even of the low-skilled, it tends to be a complement, not a substitute. And so I don't think the issue is wages. The issue, frankly, is just cultural integration. Do people feel comfortable with people that don't look like them, weren't raised like them, might not speak their language originally, being in their country to work? I think, though, lots of countries like Singapore have handled that issue. It's not like high levels of low-skilled migration is intrinsically politically unpopular. Singapore has 42% of its population is born outside of Singapore, and yet Singapore operates well. Other OECD countries, developed countries like Australia, they have 27% of the population, much higher than the US or the UK, but because they have been more upfront and willing to address the integration problem in order that you can reach these high levels of labor mobility that would just vastly dominate anything the US or the UK could do in terms of foreign aid.